How many American bison, also known as buffalo, did there used to be on the Great Plains of North America, and how low did their numbers get in the worst years of their decline? We can find answers in the 2007 book Last Stand, George Bird Grinnell, The Battle to Save the Buffalo, and the Birth of the New West. The question of how many buffalo walked the North American continent before the arrival of Europeans is a source of considerable debate. 60 million has been a common number cited, and some estimates are as high as 100 million. The late Dale Lott, a biologist at the University of California, Davis, and a leading expert on the buffalo, studied these higher numbers and made a persuasive case as to why the number of 30 million is the better estimate based on the continent's carrying capacity. Still, 30 million is an enormous number. Native Americans hunted buffalo on foot from their earliest arrival during the last ice age. Even before they acquired horses from Spanish explorers, which increased the range and effectiveness of their hunts. Plains Indians were born on a buffalo robe and wrapped in a buffalo robe when they died. In between, the buffalo was the foundation of both their economy and their culture. The Indians' use of nearly every part of the buffalo they killed is well known. Newly arrived Europeans hunted them too, but their use of the fallen animals was much more specific and, controversially, more wasteful. The waste is described in a debatably manipulative scene from the 1988 novel and 1990 film Dances with Wolves. These buffalo were lying dead on the ground, their guts spread all over the prairie just because someone wanted their tongues and hides. Why were the white hunters only interested in the tongues and hides? We can find answers in the 1993 book Cowboys, Indians, and Gunfighters. At first, whites were not very interested in the buffalo. The only market was in buffalo robes and tongues, but it was small and employed few people. Buffalo robes were used as blankets in buggies and sleds during the winter. Buffalo tongues were served in fancy restaurants. Unfortunately, even this early hunting came with what Last Stand calls the myth of inexhaustibility. The idea that the buffalo could become extinct still failed to find purchase among average Americans of the early 1870s. The myth of inexhaustibility, by contrast, found support in the descriptions of surviving herds that still blackened the prairie. Indeed, the ungraspable vastness of the prairie itself lent credibility to the notion that some infinite number of buffalo must surely remain beyond the reach of mankind. An example of this apparent inexhaustibility is this illustration titled A Holdup, 1869, where a train waits for hours as thousands of bison cross the tracks. In 1871, hunting escalated after whites discovered how to turn buffalo hide into leather for shoes, belts, furniture, and other items. By the end of 1873, the buffalo were gone from Kansas. Some hunters professed shock. One runner lamented that he and his partner had expected to be buffalo hunters all our lives. They turned instead to ranching. Soon hunters undertook a scouting trip in an effort to discover the next great hunting ground. In the panhandle of Texas, they found their prey, millions upon millions. With the Kansas herd decimated, white hunters spilled south into Indian lands. It was hunt buffalo where the buffalo are that ruled the land. The railroads brought death to millions of the shaggy beasts. Hunters held contests to see who could kill the most within a given time. Railroads also brought tourists and sportsmen. As trains chugged along slowly, passengers fired repeating rifles from windows. And people scampered to the car roofs and blazed away until their gun barrels became too hot to hold. Wherever the trains passed, they left vast open-air graveyards in their wake. Both sides of the tracks, for hundreds of miles, were lined with rotting carcasses and skeletons. Meanwhile, support to establish a national park in Wyoming and Montana succeeded in Washington, and Yellowstone National Park was born. Though all hunting in the park was soon outlawed, poaching was a problem for over 20 years, until strong commitment from the government finally brought an end to illegal hunting. Meanwhile, hunting for buffalo hides and for food warfare against Native Americans continued in the rest of North America. There were no longer buffalo in the Colorado of 1879, but conservationist George Bird Grinnell did find herds of cattle, some of them behind fences of barbed wire. In 1882, a mixed group of whites and Indians fell upon the last herd of Dakota buffalo. Even then, they called it the last Indian buffalo chase. In 1877, the Yellowstone Park superintendent reported a herd of 300 or 400 buffalo in the northeastern portion of the park near Cook City. There is no reliable count of the buffalo that still roamed Yellowstone Park in the mid-1880s. The limited patrolling by park officials made it impossible to obtain an accurate number, but an estimate of 1,000 is probably close to the mark. By 1883, fewer than 1,100 buffalo survived on the Great Plains. Population counts of the animals vary in different sources, but the numbers add up to only a few hundred wherever you look. In 1893, U.S. Army Captain Anderson had estimated the Yellowstone herd at 500 animals, but on the basis of the most recent count, in 1894, park officials now placed the total population at 200, with 250 as the outside limit. In 1884, the bison population reaches its lowest point. Around 325 wild bison are left in the United States, including 24 in Yellowstone. Meanwhile, sheltered in the lush Flathead Valley of Montana, a small privately owned herd that started with 8 calves by 1896 had grown to 300. But in Yellowstone National Park, by 1902, the Army estimated that only 23 buffalo remained alive. Fortunately, ranchers and conservationists were able to combine the small herds from Wyoming, Montana, and Texas, and the numbers began to grow. By 1905, the fenced Yellowstone herd had increased from 21 to 44. By 1915, it numbered 239. And by 1916, the herd was proliferating so effectively that park officials began castrating about 50% of the male calves. Meanwhile, the distinction between fenced and wild buffalo started to break down because park officials began encouraging the fenced buffalo to roam free. In addition to Yellowstone National Park, herds were established in Montana's National Bison Range and in Canada's Wood Buffalo National Park. By the early 1900s, the buffalo was no longer in danger of extinction, but like the Indian, it could not leave its reservations. So how many bison are left today? In 2021, the bison population in the National Bison Range is 300 to 500 animals. In the summer of 2023, Yellowstone National Park biologists counted 4,830 bison. Wood Buffalo National Park is home to around 3,000 wood bison. This is the largest free-roaming, self-regulating wood bison herd left in the world. What about total numbers in North America? According to the website for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, currently there are approximately 20,500 plains bison in conservation herds, and an additional 420,000 in commercial herds. You can find small groups in many locations throughout North America. For example, a herd of about 150 on Santa Catalina Island off the coast of Southern California. And before you go there and order a bison burger, be aware, I've already asked, and the meat is from ranches on the mainland, not local. Speaking of which, How many bison are in the late television producer Ted Turner's herd? The Turner bison herd across 14 ranches is comprised of approximately 45,000 bison, which is the largest private herd in the world. This may not be the fate you wanted for some of these animals, but at least the species will continue to thrive in the new American West. The history of the American frontier in the 19th century is a mix of adventure and conflict, conquest and tragedy. But I hope we can all be thankful for the few victories that benefit everyone, including the survival of the American bison in North America. Thank you for watching, and be careful out there. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel for new videos every week or two, and see the description below for a list of books, films, and online resources featured in this video.